Lightning, my friends, bombed Grozny? There were two powerful explosions. The building of the 2nd Regiment of the Chechen Ministry of Internal Affairs was attacked. Security forces were wounded. At least 5 ambulances took the wounded to the nearest hospital. The head of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, confirmed another drone attack on the Special Forces Regiment building in Grozny. Kadyrov has tripled his army since the start of the full-scale invasion, according to Russian media. We will discuss all of this with the President of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus, Ruslan Mahadevich Kutayev. Ruslan Mahadevich, welcome.
Good afternoon, Dasha. Greetings to you and to the viewers as well.
Dear audience, as always, please like this video and subscribe to Dasha Shaslivaya's YouTube channel. We respond quickly and go live the very next morning after the explosions in Chechnya. Ruslan Anatolievich, what's happening? Were these Ukrainian drones attacking, or is the Kremlin behind this? Is it being done deliberately to drag Kadyrov into the war?
You know, to be completely honest with you, I'm quite puzzled myself. At first, it seemed incredibly clear to me that this was just a complex game being played out. Even now, I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that this is a strategic game unfolding between the powerful FSB and Kadyrov. For me to be able to confidently and definitively say something concrete, I genuinely feel like there is still something quite significant missing from the overall picture. In this whole story, I just can't seem to find some kind of key detail. Right now, I'll definitely be listening closely to what Kadyrov himself says. Let's go back now to the news you just presented. Yes, indeed, there are hints that Kadyrov is demanding an apology. If you vividly remember earlier, Kadyrov, Voino, and Kerimov became deeply involved in, let's say, a significant confrontation over various business interests. There were numerous and extensive leaks that emerged from this situation. But what have we seen in recent days? First, Putin summoned Kadyrov, and there was a meeting between Kadyrov and Putin. Second, there as well, during the award ceremony, Putin invites Kadyrov and he participates. By doing this, Putin is showing everyone who is spreading various rumors that everything is fine between him and Kadyrov, that Kadyrov meets with him and that he invites him to high-level events, ceremonial actions, and everything is fine. Moreover, there are war correspondents and people from the front who are trying to put pressure on Kadyrov. Kadyrov's representative Alodin receives a promotion and a new rank, Lieutenant General. On all fronts, everything related to Putin is openly communicated. Everything is fine between him and Kadyrov. And finally, Kadyrov meets with the military, they shake hands, and by doing so, they also demonstrate that there are no issues between Kadyrov and the presidential administration. There are no problems. But there are absolutely no signs that Bortnikov has met with Kadyrov, or that Patrushev has met with Kadyrov, or that Kolokoltsev and Bastrikin have met with Kadyrov. So this is indeed the crucial line that from the very beginning, when you and I have been carefully analyzing all these significant actions, I have consistently insisted that even today, Vladimir Putin and the powerful FSB are like two distinct and opposing groups truly at odds with each other. And in this confrontation, each group has found its own allies. Kadyrov continues to persistently remain quite close to and trusted by Putin. And Bastrikin, when he headed the FSB's fascist project Russian Communities, which persecutes Muslims, people from the Caucasus, and migrants all over Russia, in this case, Bastrikin acted as the chief patron overseeing this project. And in doing so, he made it clear whose side he is on. That's why all these games are happening now. But once again, I have to say, for me personally, there's still something missing here, something decisive. There's something there that I could say here to you. This is what's happening in connection with that. But I think life goes on and events keep moving forward, keep developing. We'll hear something and we will definitely inform our viewers. I want to remind you, in the Chechen Republic, I have information literally at any time of day. I know what's happening there at a fairly high level and close to those people who are with Kadyrov, what they're talking about, what they're thinking. But again, I genuinely don't see, apart from what I have already mentioned and thoroughly explained, any other significant or additional actions that need to be taken for the time being. And perhaps that's important as well. It still hasn't been officially confirmed that these specific drones are indeed Ukrainian, and the Ukrainian side itself has not yet publicly confirmed it either, leaving the situation somewhat ambiguous. Could that be the intention? Budanov, he sends these drones like this, and by doing so, he provokes internal conflict and distrust. But persistently, when Kadyrov keeps repeating that it's the Ukrainians, that he will take revenge on them, it always makes me profoundly think that he's trying to subtly lull his unsuspecting enemy, meticulously pretending to follow a completely false trail, while in actual reality, he understands no worse than I do precisely who is actively attacking him, exactly who he currently has significant problems with, and indeed who, in point of fact, is truly trying to vigorously shake the very chair he's comfortably sitting on. And this work, I'm sure, is ongoing and continues persistently. We will very soon witness something entirely new and unprecedented. And right now, it absolutely must be said, for at this precise moment, it's just this second regiment that is actively striking. However, tomorrow, it will undoubtedly be administrative buildings and the very places where, in fact, they themselves currently reside and live. No one is protected from this. In this particular situation, more than anything else right now, I am absolutely sure is indeed causing significant tension and, let's just say, a very major problem for the authorities of the Chechen Republic. These are precisely the kinds of events that are happening right now, and I truly think there are such strong sentiments surrounding them.
Shlang Makamdovich. Well, indeed, Ramzan Kadyrov stated that the head of the investigative committee, Bastrikin, and the head of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Kolokoltsev, are not in the right positions. And immediately after that, attacks on Grozny begin. Let's watch a fragment of his statement.
The investigative bodies are sitting at the top, led by the Bastrikins and Kolokoltsevs. They are sitting in their positions. They just go along. They don't know what's happening in their own country, in their own homes. Kolokoltsev, yes, his team is being taken away, beaten, expelled, thrown out there. They're acting lawlessly at home. Our brothers whom we need, whom we rely on, our brothers are there. Pavel?
Gavrilovich, could what happened in Grozny actually be, as one version suggests, a drone strike, 5 ambulances, 7 law enforcement officers wounded? This was personally confirmed by Ramzan Kadyrov himself. Or 5, there are 2 different numbers being reported. This might not be connected to drones from Ukraine, but rather to warnings from the Kremlin. And after all, it's not for nothing. The 2nd Regiment of the Ministry of Internal Affairs was wounded. That is, he was accusing both Bastrikin and Kolokoltsev after that. Could this actually be a message from the Kremlin and not entirely from Ukraine? Or do you still think it's the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense?
No, I don't think so. In fact, as I said, I'm convinced it's the Kremlin. I'm convinced it's the FSB. If you look at the video you just showed, Kadyrov said the key word right at the end. He said, our brothers, the thought, the sentence was cut off, but he was talking about those who could take part on our side against Ukraine. That's the key word, which is also needed for Putin. Putin doesn't want internal division in Russia. He tries to please all peoples, migrants, anyone at all. He even invites Koreans to fight on his side. And the last thing he needs is any kind of confrontation within the state. These are exactly the days and times when you have to lie as much as possible. You have to deceive. You have to appease. Well, you have to send people to the front. And at this moment, suddenly some force appears, and not just any force, but one that is, in principle, supported by the state, which is doing the exact opposite, carrying out actions that cause these people to lose trust. Not only will these people refuse to go to the front, but in fact, they might even rise up against the authorities within Russia itself. And that's why we always ask the question, who benefits from this? Who wants this to happen? And so, while understand, Dasha, this is very important, while Russia is not yet completely weakened economically, if this internal reformatting takes place, then the FSB will be able to control the processes. But when Russia collapses economically, in fact, then the FSB will no longer be able to control either the mood of the people or the behavior of the regions. That's why I'm convinced the FSB is rushing the situation inside Russia while the authorities still govern the country, while regional authorities still control the situation. They want to implement these changes in order to continue controlling Russia and to preserve it, its integrity. This is where the main conflict lies. Putin has gone all in. He's gone all in. He understands that if he loses everything. That is, he will no longer be in power. Yes, he doesn't care about anyone. He doesn't care about Patrushev, about Kadyrov. He doesn't care about any of them. If he's gone, what will happen to them? He's going all in. But the others still leave themselves a chance. Yes, that's what Putin did. He was the one forcing us. We had nothing to do with it. That's the FSB always had an escape route. And moreover, who can say for sure right now that the FSB isn't negotiating with the Americans or with anyone else for that matter? Let's betray Putin, and they got the green light. All right, remove Putin, restore things, withdraw the troops from Ukraine, and then manage the country however you want. We don't know whether such an agreement exists or not. And I allow for the possibility that such an agreement might exist. That's why, of course, first and foremost, the FSB of Russia is behind all these actions, behind the persecution of Muslims, the creation of Russian fascist communities, the raids on Kadyrov, because he is the side that supports Putin. He needs to be neutralized, not for Ukraine, but in order to weaken Putin. And that's why all of this continues. Vyacheslav
Mahamedovich, Kadyrov has tripled his army since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion. This is a very important topic, but before we get into it, dear audience, please like this video, hit the bell so you can be the first to watch my videos, and subscribe to the Dasha YouTube channel. We already have 500,000. We've reached that number. Thank you very much. In the comments, let us know where you're watching from and write a few kind words in support of Ukraine. Vyacheslav Makamdevich, so according to preliminary information at the beginning of 2022, Kadyrov had only 7 combat units, and later Kadyrov announced the creation of 10 more units, which is actually more than a 100% increase. So a total of 17. Journalists note that 8 of them are formally subordinate to the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, namely Akhmat Russia, Akhmat Chechnya, Sever Akhmat, Zapad Akhmat, Vostok Akhmat, Yug Akhmat, the rifle battalion named after Sheikh Mansour, and the Akhmat Special Forces. But de facto, most likely, the army has tripled in size. Slava Mikhailovich, what's going on? Why is Ramzan Kadyrov doing this, and who is supporting such actions?
Dasha, this is indeed very interesting and quite significant information, and it truly does correspond accurately to the current reality. Look closely. Before the actual war began, all of the military units that were specifically created were placed under the direct command of, under the banners and patronage of the Russian National Guard. Yes, Kadyrov, unlike all other regional leaders, had an advantage. He personally created them, both in terms of scale and according to the level of loyalty and devotion to him. Now the war begins, and the Ministry of Defense is such a closed ministry that any movement there is strictly controlled, with the knowledge and under the subordination of the Minister of Defense. And here too, there is an exception. Here as well, for example, the Minister of Defense of the Chechen Republic is Apti Alaudinov. And all the units that are funded by the Ministry of Defense, they are pre-designated. They are under the Ministry of Defense, subordinate to Apti Alaudinov, that is Kadyrov's Minister of Defense. So they are also subordinate to Kadyrov. And that's true, and his army has grown. Its numbers have increased significantly. I don't know the exact figure, but we can confidently say that during the war, this number could have jumped 2 or 3 times. And here is the key point. They all report exclusively to Kadyrov, exclusively. And at the front lines, they answer to him. Yes, Alaudinov coordinates with the Russian command. Certain operations, some campaigns, retreats, it doesn't matter, various types of logistical operations, but they remain under Alaudinov's command, that is under Kadyrov's command. This is very important, and this is his army. So when he gives the order, they will retreat, they will come. But how long they will continue to obey him depends on the Kremlin and on Putin, because the funding for these military units continues. And why does it continue? Because it is the will, the order, and the desire of the head of the Russian state, Putin. And he, Kadyrov, in this regard, everything is just fine. They receive new ranks, orders, and medals. They are held in high esteem, and everything is fine for them there. No matter who stirs things up, who shouts, or what suspicions there might be there. Supposedly, Kadyrov supposedly wants to oust Putin, and Putin keeps confirming that everything is fine between them. And as you and I discussed a bit earlier, just a few days ago, he demonstrated this once again.
Shlamov Favdevich. So it's possible that Putin is afraid of a coup d'etat and Kadyrov's army would be the one to protect him from the FSB. What you said, that in certain possible configurations, the security forces could overthrow Putin and Ramzan Kadyrov serves as his protective wall. Let's talk about this configuration.
Of course, without a doubt, Zolotov's National Guard shouldn't be discounted either. Well, despite all this, the closest, most trusted, and well, here we also have to remember the image aspect. That's why wherever the Kadyrovites show up, they're so bold, ready to sweep away anyone in their path. Yes, and they don't really hide it. They don't want to fight against Ukrainians. They still remember the recent war in Chechnya when this same Russian army was killing them. Yes, they play at being TikTokers, but inside Russia, when it comes time to go up against the FSB, the Ministry of Defense or the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and the MVD knows this and the FSB knows it too, they will fight them desperately and fiercely. And in this particular case, the primary reason they are vigorously defending, or rather the convenient pretext they are employing, is that they are actively protecting President Putin, their esteemed leader. But the real reason is a deep-seated hatred for the FSB, a deep hatred for those people who still wear crosses, for the killing of Chechens, for the killing of Chechen children, for the raped women. If anyone thinks that the people in Kadyrov's units have forgotten this, they are gravely mistaken. Yes, they run from the Ukrainians, they don't want to join the war, but in Moscow, they won't run from the FSB guys. They will fight them head on. And the FSB knows this. And that's why they're wary of them. And that's why they're planning to get rid of Kadyrov's army by any means possible. How? By sending them to the front in Ukraine. And when he's forced to do this, what does Kadyrov do? He doesn't touch his own army. Instead, he starts mobilizing people from Chechnya itself, completely without any right to do so, for violating traffic rules, crossed at a red light, gave the wrong look. Everyone gets arrested, everyone is detained and sent to war. These are the people who stay at home and support Ukraine. They worry about Ukraine. And these people are thrown onto the front lines against Ukraine. These are the kinds of events happening now, both in Chechnya and around Chechnya. And in fact, in Moscow and around Putin as well. These are the kinds of it's a political kaleidoscope of different events, different opinions. And all of this is mixed together and it's contradictory. And frankly, at any moment, a conflict could arise that would escalate into fighting and active confrontation.
Slava Mikhailovich, is it true that at the present moment and before Putin came to power, was it the FSB that chose who would become president or the head of the Russian Federation? In other words, the security services selected all the candidates and the FSB also chose Putin. So by that logic, the FSB could also remove Putin. I'm curious about your
opinion. That's not true. No, I know for sure. I know who Aksenenko, Stepashin, and Putin are. 3 names. Yeltsin flew to the US in '99. He took them with him. Who makes the choice? I don't know who. Clinton was president at that time. He picked that name, but he coordinated with someone and they settled on the name Putin. That's what Berezovsky told me, the man who was in power at the time. But actually, on the other hand, according to Boris Berezovsky, he was the one who chose Putin as the most utterly despicable, truly the least cowardly among all those negative and undesirable qualities that one might possess. And they chose him to protect the oligarch's capital because they thought he had no ambition, that he wouldn't have any desire to resist. In other words, it was precisely because of these particular qualities that Putin was chosen. But after he was chosen, it was he who gradually brought in people like Ivanov. By the way, during his time in the KGB, they were his superiors, as well as Patrushev and Telkesov. He quietly brought these people in. And what could they do? At that time, their only experience was protecting kiosks somewhere in back alleys. And so if you analyze it, over the course of the 2000s, they gradually learned that there are banks, there are certain assets, there are various resources, natural resources. And quietly, silently, they learned and managed to seize 50% of the capital from the oligarchs who had brought him to power. And on this basis, these liberal oligarchs and Siloviki oligarchs, Each had about 50% of the capital, and with these assets, they entered Ukraine.
We also discussed this with you, including the fact that some are fighting in Syria against Bashar al-Assad's regime. We discussed this video as well. What are the prospects today for Chechen battalions to go to the Caucasus and deoccupy the republic so that they can be independent? How realistic is it for the Caucasus to become free? As the president of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus, your opinion is very valuable.
Well, first of all, I have connections with them. I interact with them. I have to say, I forgot the name of that settlement. Just yesterday or the day before, both Chechens, Karaches, and Circassians liberated a very large territory, by the way, Syrian. All these Caucasians, Syrians, they resettled about 150 years ago. And our native North Caucasians helped them. They expelled Kurdish units that outnumbered them by 3, 5, even 10 times. They asked for a corridor. The Kurds left, withdrew, and even the Syrian opposition armies were surprised. They were amazed at how quickly they dealt with these heavily armed Kurds. In other words, they are strengthening their positions there, consolidating their hold on those places. And of course, they say unequivocally that if in the North Caucasus, in the war, in the struggle against Putin, their help or their combat experience is needed, they will always respond and always come to help. I think, after all, as has been mentioned here many times, the drones were provided by Ukraine and there were Ukrainian instructors. This could very well be the case. In principle, with the assistance and active support of Ukraine, if things go well in Georgia, all of this could happen, especially if Ukraine's ally, the United States of America, is also willing. In that case, well, this visual representation of assistance, clearly originating from that specific region and extending towards the Caucasus, is indeed quite an objective, undeniable, and entirely expected reality.
Slava Mahamedovich, let me finish this. I would like to show this video. These are Syrian rebels. In Syria, after the defeat of Bashar Assad's regime, they are wiping their feet on a portrait of Putin. Let's take a look. A very telling video. What does this indicate?
I think this will happen in Ukraine, in the Caucasus, and in Georgia as well. But what's more telling here is something else. Right now, we are on the verge of a situation where, at Trump's insistence, a ceasefire must finally be established. I don't think this will happen in December. Most likely in January, somewhere in the middle of January, these consultations may conclude. With some meetings, and most likely a ceasefire will take place. But before the events in Syria, Putin had one set of assets, and now he has completely different assets. Frankly speaking, he was showing off there, and rightfully so. He controlled quite a significant territory, both for aviation and for naval basing. It was a place through which they carried out all their projects in Africa. And suddenly, all of this collapses at once. Trump, as we know, is a person who, in principle, worships and admires strength. He likes it when there is a winner, someone who can win and defend that victory. And right on the very significant eve of a truly important and pivotal decision concerning Ukraine, Putin, experiences a profound loss. He loses. He suddenly becomes absolutely nothing, a mere nobody. And in this particular respect, from a purely psychological and deeply perceptive point of view, even in terms of public perception, for Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin will no longer be the formidable player he once genuinely admired and respected. Putin goes into negotiations with Ukraine as the losing side. He lost on another front, he failed, he lost. What does this tell us? It means equally to the same degree. The same thing could happen in Ukraine. That's why I think we still cannot fully predict the profound practical consequences of this significant loss and this devastating defeat, which will undoubtedly have far-reaching implications. I think these will be very serious consequences for Putin, for his power, and for Russia as a whole. This is a very serious failure.
Shlam Mahamdevich Kutayev, President of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus. Friends, please like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and write a few words in the comments to support Ukraine. Also, let us know where you're watching from. Share your location in the comments. Every like, every comment, every subscription, every bit of your support shows that you are on the side of light. You are with Ukraine. Friends, thank you so much. Ruslan Mukhamatovich, thank you, and see you again very soon.
All the best. Take care. Support Dasha and may her platform reach 1 million followers. That's the kind of goal we should set. Goodbye.